The Warren Ridge Estate boardroom looked exactly as it had in 1991, the same high-gloss walnut table stretching the length of the room, reflecting decades of power plays and family clashes like an artifact trapped in amber. Framed on the paneled walls were snapshots of charity auctions and gala events milestones from Warren Dynamics' storied past, and posed family portraits where everyone wore the same polished smile. I wasn't in any of those photos. My name is Jessica Warren, though among my relatives I'm more commonly known as the dropout, the one who left. I'm 34 now, but to them I'll always be the reckless girl who walked away from the comfort of generational wealth to chase a tech startup dream. Today's family emergency meeting was held at Warren Hills Winery under the guise of reviewing finances. What they didn't know, what made me smile behind my composed expression, was that the entire Warren business empire had already shifted hands. Mine. I sat at the very end of the table, quietly composed in a tailored charcoal blazer, observing as my uncle Frank Whitmore fumbled through another crisis PowerPoint. His breath was labored, his irritation clear as he slapped the projector screen. "These numbers are atrocious," he barked. "We're hemorrhaging money in every department." Brad Whitmore, my cousin, barely out of grad school and already flashing a senior VP title like a badge, scoffed with mock confidence. "It's just a temporary dip. We've been through worse," he said, reclining as though the storm would pass without effort. He had no idea that Warren Dynamics now answered to NovEdge Capital, the company I founded and strategically used to gain quiet total control via shell firms and silent buyouts. Lindsay, my older sister, didn't even glance up from her rose gold tablet. "The Velocity Tech Ops division is dead weight," she muttered. "Might as well unload it." I pressed my tongue against my cheek, hiding a smirk. That same division, quietly overhauled by my firm, was now a rising star in Silicon Valley, thanks to our AI-driven drone logistics technology. Frank noticed the twitch of amusement and zeroed in. "Something funny, Jessica," he snapped, his glare piercing. The room fell still. Even Lindsay stopped scrolling. "Just running through some ideas," I said, smoothly folding my hands. Frank laughed, but it held no humor. "Ideas from you." He leaned forward, disdain oozing from every word. The woman who left a guaranteed future to tinker with code in a shared workspace. This is serious business, Jessica. They still didn't know, but they would. 5 years earlier, I had rejected a cushy, powerless title, Executive Innovation Officer, a meaningless role designed to keep me silent while Brad and Lindsay played CEO and COO. Instead, I took my inheritance and launched NovEdge Capital, quietly acquiring undervalued tech assets and steering turnarounds from behind the scenes. "I've worked in corporate restructuring for some time now," I said, voice even but edged. Brad scoffed. "You mean your little app project, Jessica? This is Warren Dynamics. We deal in billions. Maybe let the adults handle this." I almost laughed. My little project operated from the top 3 floors of Summit Point Plaza, a building he couldn't even get a tour of. The co-working space narrative was intentional, a smokescreen to keep them underestimating me. My father, Robert Warren, sat quietly near the windows, his eyes flickering with unease. He had stepped down as CEO last spring, reluctantly passing the reins to Frank despite every red flag I had raised. Jessica's company, NovEdge. "It's done well," he offered timidly. "Maybe we should hear her out." Frank scoffed so hard he nearly choked. "Robert, your daughter is playing pretend CEO while we're managing a Fortune 500 company. You know she's always been a disappointment." That word disappointment hit like it always did. I'd heard it after proposing the next-gen automation plan, after refusing to marry the CFO's son, after carving my own path outside the Warren script. Lindsay let out a theatrical sigh. "Are we done here? I've got lunch at the Heritage Pavilion." I looked at my watch. 2 minutes. That was all that stood between their arrogance and the reality I had orchestrated. "The tech ops division isn't your problem," I said, meeting Frank's eyes. "The entire business model is outdated. You're clinging to dust." He slammed the table. "I've run this company with discipline, tradition, and control, your grandfather's principles. I thought of my grandfather, the visionary who dared to experiment with hybrid freight models when others scoffed. He would have embraced innovation, not barricaded the company in bureaucracy. And that's exactly why you're losing," I said quietly. "The market changed. You refused to." Frank turned crimson, voice rising. "You lost your right to criticize the day you walked away. You're worthless to this family, worthless to this company." Before I could answer, the boardroom door burst open. Frank's usually composed assistant stood pale and breathless. "Mr. Whitmore," she stammered, "you need to take this. It's urgent. The board, they just confirmed that Nova Edge Capital has acquired controlling interest in Warren Dynamics." The silence was so thick it choked the air. Brad dropped his designer pen with a metallic clink. Lindsay's tablet slipped from her hands. Frank stood frozen, eyes wide, lips parted in disbelief. "Nova Edge," my father whispered. "Yes," I said, rising, "though the full name is Nova Edge Global Strategies. We're the largest digital transformation firm in the country, and now Warren Dynamics is one of our newest assets." Silence, now heavier and more oppressive than ever, settled over the boardroom like a curtain drawn over the past. The weight of years, of every dismissive glance, every whispered aside, every patronizing smile that trailed behind my supposed failure, pressed in on the room's inhabitants, suffocating the last fumes of their bravado. Brad's voice cracked, the quiet, hoarse, and disbelieving. That's not possible. Nova Edge is a multi-billion-dollar firm. You just had a startup." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drew my phone with deliberate calm, mirrored its screen to the boardroom projector, and let the evidence speak. My photo appeared poised beneath the polished header: founder and CEO, Nova Edge Global Strategies. It was accompanied by a world map lit with points of influence columns of soaring revenue figures, and in bold the headline they had never imagined reading: "Nova Edge acquires controlling stake in Warren Dynamics." That so-called startup, I said, meeting their eyes without flinching, was a mask. It kept your expectations low, while I built an empire you couldn't even comprehend. Lindsay's composure drained from her face, her earlier smugness vanishing like fog beneath the sun. Her voice was quiet, almost childlike. "What happens to the Tech Ops division?" "It's being restructured," I replied, letting my voice carry the weight of inevitability, along with the rest. "In 10 minutes, the board will confirm me as CEO. At noon, every media outlet in the country will know what you're just now realizing." Frank finally found his voice again, ragged and sharp. "You can't do this. We're family." A soft, almost bitter laugh escaped me. "Was it family when you called me worthless in front of everyone? When you dismissed every proposal I brought, not because they lacked merit, but because I lacked a penis and the right surname alignment? When you handed control to the least capable, just to preserve your ego?" My father rose then slowly, like a man who had suddenly remembered how to stand. His voice trembled heavy with regret. "Jessica, please. We can talk. We can fix this." I looked at him, really looked at the man who had once been my hero, then my disappointment, and now just a man struggling to understand the daughter he had refused to believe in. "I already did," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. The truth, in its quiet firmness, was its own thunder. And if anyone watching has ever been called worthless only to rise and exceed every expectation, then perhaps you understand this moment wasn't an end. It was the beginning. Subscribe, because this story doesn't end in that boardroom. It only launches there. "We could have done this differently," I added, turning back to my father. "We could have had this conversation years ago. You could have believed me when I warned you about Frank. You could have helped me save the company before it slid toward freefall. But you all made your choices, Frank with his sneers, Lindsay with her dismissive superiority, Brad with his arrogance, and you with your silence." At that moment, Emily Shaw, my ever-efficient assistant, appeared in the doorway, a sleek press folder clutched in one hand. "Ma'am, the media's calling. They want your comment on the acquisition." Frank collapsed into the chair he had once claimed as his throne, now dethroned, visibly smaller than he had ever looked. "What am I supposed to tell them? That my niece, the one we mocked and dismissed, just bought out her entire family?" I stepped forward, my heels echoing sharply against the floor, and stopped in front of him. "Not niece," I said, voice cool and crisp as glass. "CEO." The room erupted. Lindsay wept, mascara streaking her once perfect cheeks. Brad shouted into his phone, his voice brittle with panic. Frank's shoulders sagged, his skin pale as old parchment. But I wasn't done. I strode to the head of the table, the seat of authority once his, now indisputably mine. I placed my laptop down with precision and opened the files outlining the new operational strategy. "Let's begin. I have some thoughts on revitalizing the Velocity Tech Ops division. Where there had once been derision and disbelief, there was now only silence, tight-lipped, stunned, helpless. Those who once laughed now sat frozen, as I laid out my plans, my company, my rules. The woman they dismissed as a disappointment had just seized the reins of everything they thought untouchable. The board meeting that followed was brief. With my controlling share, there was no argument, no dissent. At precisely noon, the press release went live. Warren Dynamics stock shot up 15% within minutes. The world had spoken, and it welcomed the change. My family, however, was crumbling. Frank stormed across the room, veins bulging in his neck. "This is illegal. You must have cheated. There's no way." I met his anger with unflinching poise. Everything was legal. Every share purchase, every merger. Maybe if you'd spent less time grandstanding at golf tournaments and more time reviewing quarterly reports, you might have noticed Nova Edge buying up control. Lindsay was furiously tapping on her phone, her face a mask of desperation. "I'm calling our lawyers," she hissed. "Feel free," I said. "The Chief Innovation Officer position revoked. Brad's VP title terminated." Brad gaped. "You can't fire us, we're Warrens." "So am I said, my voice a razor cloaked in velvet. "The same Warren you all called worthless." "How does it feel, Brad, to be fired by someone you never took seriously?" My father remained silent. His posture collapsed into a quiet surrender. He looked at me as if seeing me anew. "Where did we go wrong?" he murmured. "How did we not see this coming?" "Because you saw what you wanted to," I replied. "A daughter who challenged the narrative. You never thought I was rewriting the rules." Emily reappeared. "Miss Warren, the transition team is waiting. Auditors are ready to begin." Frank paled at the word. "Auditors." "Of course," I said with a smile. "We need to understand the full extent of the damage, starting with those country club memberships you charged as business development, and the loans disguised as bonuses to family friends." Frank opened his mouth, but no sound came. "You're tearing the family apart," Lindsay whispered. "You never treated me like family," I said. "You treated me like a liability. And now you'll understand what it means to have no control." My phone buzzed confirmation. The first wave of leadership changes had gone live. "Emily, have security assist them," I said. "They need to vacate immediately." "You haven't won," Frank spat, voice shaking. "The family won't let this stand." "The family sold their shares years ago," I replied evenly. "Nova Edge owns 58% of Warren Dynamics. I own your titles, your secrets, and your futures." As security entered, I turned to my father one last time. "You can stay on," I offered, "as an advisor, but only if you're ready to listen, truly listen this time." He nodded slowly, eyes shimmering. "When did you become so powerful?" "I always was," I whispered. "You just never looked close enough." The week that followed was a tempest of change. The old Warren logo came down, replaced by a streamlined, modern design. The Tech Ops division, once the family's punching bag, emerged as the company's flagship. Nepotism was exiled. Merit rose. Innovation replaced stagnation. Of course, they didn't vanish quietly. Frank tried rallying support only to discover he had none. Lindsay leaked gossip, but the media only wanted stories of Nova Edge's revolution. Brad tried a different tactic, one laced in desperation, masquerading as charm. He showed up unannounced at my new office, the one that now claimed the view he used to brag about corner skyline, top tier, all glass and power. The office that once served as his kingdom. "Come on, Jessica," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, the edges of his confidence fraying. "We're still family. Surely we can find a way through this. I've changed." I leaned back into the plush leather chair he used to call his throne, steepling my fingers and watching him. "Have you?" I asked, my voice low, steady. He faltered, then rushed in with the plea he'd prepared. "I learned my lesson. We all did." "You proved your point, Jessica. Let's rebuild. Let's make this a real family business again." "It is," I said evenly, standing and walking around the desk to face him directly. "It's just not the family you envisioned. Your role already filled. By someone competent. You might want to polish your resume." Tears welled in his eyes, the fall from hubris to humiliation complete. Another first in Warren family history, Brad Whitmore, the golden boy, undone by his own arrogance. The audit confirmed everything I had long suspected. It laid bare a legacy of corruption and carelessness. Frank's decades of siphoning company funds into offshore accounts under false consultancy invoices. Lindsay's bloated payrolls padded with friends disguised as contractors, and Brad's damning use of insider knowledge to trade Warren Dynamics stock. My legal team was grim but thorough. "The SEC will want to speak with them," one advisor murmured. I didn't flinch. Then let them, I said. Give them everything. Full transparency. Every wire transfer, every shell company, every phantom consultant. Let the world see what they've done under the mask of legacy. My father, now a nominal advisor, watched with a kind of stunned detachment, his hands often folded tightly, as if trying to contain all that had unraveled. One night, his voice barely audible, he whispered, "They could go to prison." "They made their decisions," I replied, "just as they chose to call me worthless." The fallout came hard and fast. Frank was indicted for embezzlement, the headlines unflinching. Lindsay and Brad were barred permanently from participating in the securities market, their reputations shredded. The Warren name, once a symbol of upper-crust distinction, now trended with scandal and shame. And yet, amid the wreckage, Nova Edge soared. Our valuation doubled within 30 days. Investors finally saw what I'd seen from the beginning, true value long obscured by ego and excess. With proper funding, the Velocity Tech Ops division flourished. We pioneered systems that would come to redefine an entire industry's logistics. The company's soul shifted, shedding the skin of inheritance for the muscle of innovation. Half a year after the takeover, I sat at my desk reviewing reports metrics now painted in confident green. The city glimmered outside, but I wasn't admiring the view. My eyes were fixed on a photograph in a sleek silver frame. It was the last Warren Christmas I had attended, everyone radiant with performative joy, while I lingered at the edge, already dreaming of a world beyond. Emily entered quiet as snowfall. "Your uncle's sentencing is tomorrow," she said. I thought for a moment, picturing Frank in a courtroom stripped of all his veneers. "No," I said at last. "I have work to do." She nodded, understanding, then paused at the threshold. "One more thing, the new boardroom portraits just arrived. Shall I hang them?" I didn't hesitate. "Take the old ones down. This is no longer a family business. It's something better." Later, long after the office had emptied and silence had taken over the corridors, there was a hesitant knock. My father stepped in, shoulders bowed, hair more silver than I remembered. His gaze held something unfamiliar, not shame, not confusion, but pride. "I underestimated you," he said, voice hollowed with sincerity. "We all did." I leaned back, the years of battles pressing on my spine. Forgiveness was never the point, I told him. This wasn't revenge, it was proof. That success doesn't have to wear a family crest. That value isn't bestowed by tradition. He nodded slowly, as if each gesture required recalibration. "What you've built? It's extraordinary." "It always could have been," I said. "But none of you were willing to see beyond what had always been." He turned to leave, then hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Even if I never understood how you became this woman." I looked at him, and in that quiet moment gave him the truth. "I always was," I whispered. "You just never looked close enough." When he left, I stood at the window, watching the Napa skyline twinkle like a crown of stars. Somewhere across the city, my former relatives were facing a future they never imagined. Elizabeth had sold her penthouse. Brad was applying for jobs in offices he once mocked. Gerald was preparing for court. But I wasn't thinking of them. I was thinking about what came next. Catherine's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 7 Aero PM is here. The venture capital team from Menlo Park." I adjusted my blazer and smiled. "Send them in. And Emily, have the old family portraits delivered to their new homes. They'll need the memories more than I will." Those photos, so meticulously staged, would now rest in less dignified places. Elizabeth's cramped rental, Brad's childhood bedroom, Frank's lawyer's office. I wouldn't be in those pictures anymore. My image belonged elsewhere, on magazine covers, innovation panels, strategic alliances, in futures unwritten. Because in the end, success wasn't about vengeance. It was about visibility, living the life they swore I'd never be capable of out loud in full color. If my story speaks to you, share yours. Drop a comment. Tell me when they told you no and what you did next. I'd love to hear how you turned your own doubts into fuel. And if this story moved, you consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Not for numbers or vanity, but because each new voice added strengthens the chorus of those who've risen beyond doubt. Every like helps signal to someone else out there that it's never too late to rise. Because success isn't about proving them wrong. It's about reclaiming your voice. And if that resonates, hit subscribe. Let's build this movement together. Quiet power, bold ambition, unstoppable resolve. Your comeback starts now.